The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Toronto glittered under 1,000 crystal lights, and somewhere near the back of the room, a woman named Vivian Holbrook stood quietly, smoothing the front of a gown that had cost her 3 months of careful saving, and tried very hard not to let her hands shake. She had not wanted to come. She had told herself that, over and over, in the weeks since the invitation had arrived, a cream-colored envelope slipped through her mail slot with the kind of casual cruelty that only someone who knew her well could manage. She had stood in her hallway for a long time, holding it. The return address was a street in Forest Hill she still knew by heart. Her mother had called from Barrie and said, "Don't go, Viv. What do you have to prove?" Her older sister, Joelle, had driven all the way down from Sudbury and sat across from her at the kitchen table and said almost exactly the same thing, with slightly more profanity involved. Vivian had listened to all of it, and then she had said yes anyway. Not to prove anything. That was the part no one seemed to understand. She had agreed to attend the Hartwell Foundation Gala, the charity event of the year, hosted by her ex-husband and his new fiancée, because she had received a phone call 3 days before the invitation arrived from a man named Theodore Braxton, and that phone call had changed something very fundamental about who she was when she walked into a room. But no one at this gala knew that yet. She could see her ex-husband across the room now. Gregory Holbrook, tall, silver-templed, the kind of handsome that photographs well and erodes in person once you know him. He stood near the champagne table, with his arm around a woman named Celeste Wynne. Celeste was 31, formerly a lifestyle influencer with 200,000 followers, and a talent for making every room feel like it existed primarily to frame her. She was wearing a deep red dress that cost more than Vivian's car. She was laughing at something Gregory had said, tilting her head at a practiced angle. Vivian had met Celeste exactly once 14 months ago, in a context she had not chosen. She didn't think about that meeting often. She had spent a significant amount of effort in the past year and a half, making sure she did not think about it. The thing about Gregory, the thing Vivian had not understood until it was too late, was that he had never been cruel in obvious ways. He had not raised his voice. He had not broken things. What he had done quietly and persistently over 11 years of marriage was make her smaller. A comment here about her weight, a correction there about something she'd said at a dinner party, a gentle but consistent implication that her instincts were off, her judgment unreliable, her professional choices somewhere between admirable and embarrassing. She had believed him for a long time. She had been very good at believing him. She had been 8 weeks pregnant when he told her he was in love with Celeste. He'd said it on a Tuesday evening in their kitchen in Rosedale, while she was making dinner. She could still smell the garlic browning in the pan. He had stood by the refrigerator with his jacket still on, as though he had calculated the precise geometry of the conversation, and determined that leaving his jacket on was the correct choice for a man who intended to keep his options open. He had told her he was sorry. He had told her that what they had wasn't working, had not been working for some time. He had told her, and this was the part that still visited her at strange moments, in grocery store lineups and on the subway and in the middle of the night, that Celeste made him feel like himself again. She had turned off the stove. She had not cried. She had asked him, very quietly, to leave the kitchen. He had filed for divorce 6 weeks later. She had lost the pregnancy at 12 weeks, alone in a hospital in North York on a Wednesday morning, with her sister on the phone from Sudbury because there had been no one else to call. Gregory had sent flowers. She had given them to the nurses. That year had been the kind of year that does not make for good storytelling. There were no dramatic reversals, no obvious villains to point at, no moment where a stranger appeared and handed her a check. There was just the slow, grinding work of becoming a person again from the inside out. There was her apartment in Leslieville, small, with a good window in the kitchen, which she had chosen specifically for the light. There was her job at the architecture firm, which she had almost quit twice and had not. There was her therapist, Dr. Kim, who had said something to her once that she had written on a post-it note and stuck to the edge of her bathroom mirror. "You are not the story he told about you." There was, eventually, Theodore Braxton. She had not expected him. She had not been looking for him. They had met at a conference in Vancouver, a sustainable design symposium. She had almost skipped because she was tired and it was February, and the idea of flying across the country felt insurmountable. She had gone anyway. She had sat down at a panel discussion on urban housing development, and the man beside her had been reading a copy of a book she had loved for years. And she had said something about it without thinking, the way you do when you're tired enough to stop being careful. And he had looked up and said, "I've been waiting to meet someone who's actually read this." And they had talked through the entire panel discussion, and then through dinner, and then through the better part of the following day. Theodore was 43. He had grown up in Halifax and now ran a development company out of Calgary. He had kind eyes and a very dry sense of humor and a patience with silence that she had not encountered before in a man. He listened the way some people listen, not building his response while she was still speaking, but actually waiting to hear what she said before he had any thoughts about it. She had not told him about Gregory. Not that first night, not that first weekend. She had told him about her work, about a housing project she had been consulting on in Hamilton, about her grandmother's kitchen in Timmins where she had learned to love architecture by studying the way the afternoon light moved across old linoleum floors. He had said, "That's a very specific thing to love." She had said, "Most of the things worth loving are." They had stayed in touch after Vancouver. Phone calls, mostly. Long ones, late at night. She had told him about the divorce eventually, and about the hospital, and he had not said the wrong thing, which she had half expected. He had just listened. Then he had said, "I'm sorry that happened to you," and meant it in the plain and straightforward way that she had almost forgotten people could mean things. She was not going to tell anyone at this gala about Theodore. Not tonight. Not yet. She was going to let Gregory run his event. The Hartwell Foundation Gala had been Gregory's project for 3 years. A charity fundraiser for children's literacy programs across Ontario, which was a cause Vivian genuinely believed in and had, in fact, suggested to him back in 2021, when they were still married and she was on the board of a reading initiative in Scarborough. He had taken the idea and built it into something with his name on it, which was very Gregory. He had invited her tonight for a reason. She was not naive about this. She had heard, through channels that were not entirely her business but became her business anyway, that he had told people she was struggling, that the divorce had been hard on her, that she was, and this was the word that had reached her through a mutual friend at a law firm downtown, diminished. She did not think Gregory had used that word accidentally. He was careful with words. He always had been. The invitation to the gala had been framed as a gesture of goodwill, a chance to support a cause she cared about. Perhaps to show the city that they were adults about all of this. But Vivian had been married to Gregory Holbrook for 11 years. And she understood his gestures the way a meteorologist understands pressure systems. She knew what was coming. He wanted to display her. He wanted his colleagues and his donors and his new fiancée's social circle to see Vivian Holbrook and look like a woman who had been left behind. He wanted her to be the cautionary tale in the corner. She could see it in the way he had glanced at her when she entered. A flicker of something. Satisfaction, anticipation. Before his face settled back into its professional warmth. He had not yet had a good look at her. She had taken some care with tonight, not to impress Gregory. That thought had genuinely not crossed her mind. But because she had woken up that morning in her apartment on Carlaw Avenue and looked at the light coming through her kitchen window and felt, for the first time in a long time, entirely herself. She had put on the midnight blue dress she had bought on a trip to Montreal 2 months ago. She had done her hair the way she liked it. She was wearing her grandmother's earrings, small drops of amber that caught the light and meant something. She looked like a woman who had moved forward, because she had. Across the room, she could see Gregory leaning towards Celeste now, saying something. Celeste's eyes moved to Vivian and then moved away. There was something almost imperceptible in Celeste's expression, a recalibration, small and private. Vivian picked up a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and turned to look at the room instead. The gala was beautiful. She would give him that. The floral arrangements were extraordinary. White peonies and eucalyptus trailing down long tables. The silent auction items were arranged along one wall. The crowd was the usual mix of Toronto money and cultural ambition and genuine generosity, all dressed up and occasionally indistinguishable from one another. She found her table. She was seated with people she didn't know, which she suspected was deliberate. Far from the head table, near the back, the kind of placement that says you are here on sufferance. Fine. She preferred it, actually. She could see the whole room from here. The man sitting next to her introduced himself as a land developer from Burlington, and they had a very pleasant conversation about housing affordability and the Greenbelt, and a documentary they had both apparently watched on the same weekend in March. He had no idea who she was in relation to the evening's host, which was refreshing. Dinner was served. The speeches began. Gregory spoke well. He always had. He talked about literacy and access and the children who grew up without books in the house, and his voice did the thing it always did. Settled into a frequency that sounded like sincerity, and probably, Vivian thought, was. He was not a fraud in the simple sense. He genuinely believed in the work. It was possible to genuinely believe in something good and still do harm in other directions. She had spent a long time learning that distinction. Celeste spoke after him. Briefly, warmly, with the particular fluency of someone who had been performing for a camera for years. She thanked the donors. She said a few words about Gregory's vision. She smiled at the room the way people smile when they have spent some time practicing how to smile at rooms. Vivian clapped with everyone else and drank her water. And then, because timing is sometimes a thing the universe handles without your input, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, under the table. Theodore, texting from Calgary. How's the gala? She typed back, about what I expected, beautiful flowers. His response came quickly. Holding up okay? She looked up at the room, the chandeliers, the white peonies, Gregory at the front with his hand on Celeste's back, and she thought about how much ground she had covered to be sitting in this chair and feeling, if not entirely comfortable, then at least entirely intact. More than okay, she typed. Good, he wrote back. Then, I have something to tell you when you're out. Call me after? She put the phone away. The program continued. There was a live auction for a week at a cottage in Muskoka that went for $32,000. There was a string quartet. There was the kind of pleasant post-dinner drift where people left their tables and moved around the room and talked about things that mattered and things that didn't in roughly equal measure. Gregory found her near the silent auction table, which she suspected was not accidental. Vivian, he said. He had his fundraising smile on, genuine enough, but positioned. I'm glad you came. It's a good cause, she said. He studied her for a moment. Something behind his eyes was reconfiguring. She had dressed in a way that did not match whatever prediction he had made about her, and he was adjusting. You look well, he said, with a slight emphasis on the well that was meant to express surprise. Thank you, she said pleasantly. You too. Celeste appeared at his elbow, holding a glass of wine and wearing an expression Vivian could not entirely read. Up close, Celeste was prettier than her photographs and younger looking, and also, Vivian thought unexpectedly, somewhat tense. There was something around her eyes that looked like work. Vivian, Celeste said. I'm glad you could make it, Celeste. Congratulations on the engagement. A brief pause. Gregory's hand moved to Celeste's waist. Thank you, Celeste said. We're very happy. I can see that, Vivian said, and meant it without rancor, which she suspected was not the response either of them had prepared for. She could see Gregory searching for the thing he had planned to say. She could see him finding it. I wanted to say, he began, with the careful warmth of a man delivering a prepared remark, that I hope this evening shows that there are no hard feelings, that we can all be adults, she offered. Exactly. He seemed slightly relieved. You've been through a difficult time, and I think it speaks well of you that, Gregory, she said gently, and something in her voice stopped him. Not anger, just clarity. You don't need to do this. He blinked. The speech, she said, the gesture. It's kind. But you don't need to. She picked up a card from the silent auction table, glanced at it, set it back down. I came because I care about literacy programs in this city, and because I had a good week and I wanted to go somewhere nice. She looked at him with the particular steadiness of someone who has done a great deal of interior work and has the receipts. That's all. He didn't quite know what to do with that. She could see it. He had prepared for brittle dignity, or poorly concealed hurt, or some third option involving an awkward scene near the coat check. He had not prepared for this. Celeste was watching her with an expression that had shifted into something less guarded. I read about your Hamilton project, Celeste said abruptly. The affordable housing consultation in Azure magazine. She paused. It was impressive. Vivian looked at her. Thank you. It was a good project. The design you proposed for the community courtyard. Celeste stopped herself. Then, more quietly, I grew up in co-op housing. In Scarborough. That kind of space makes a real difference. There was a moment between them that Gregory was not part of and seemed to feel the edges of. I didn't know that, Vivian said. No, Celeste said. She took a small sip of her wine. Gregory said something about needing to speak to a donor and excused himself with smooth professionalism, leaving the two of them standing together by the silent auction table in a silence that was not hostile. Vivian wasn't sure what it was. Honest, maybe. I'm not going to make a scene, Vivian said finally. In case that was a concern. It wasn't, Celeste said. Then, maybe a little. Despite everything, Vivian almost smiled. I'm past scenes. Celeste looked at her for a moment. He told people you weren't doing well, she said. It came out carefully, like she had been holding it for a while. I know. I didn't. She stopped. I wasn't sure how much I believed it. She looked down at her glass. He does that, I think. Tells stories about people. Makes them smaller before they arrive. The room moved around them. 100 conversations, the string quartet starting up again somewhere near the far wall. Yes, Vivian said quietly. He does. They stood there a moment longer, and then Celeste excused herself with a murmured something and moved back toward the crowd. Vivian watched her go and felt something she had not expected to feel tonight. A complicated pity for a woman she had every right to resent. She stayed another 40 minutes. She spoke with the director of the literacy program about a potential consulting project. She had a very good piece of lemon tart. She said goodbye to the man from Burlington and exchanged cards. She went to the coat check and retrieved her coat, and she walked out of the Fairmont into the October air, which smelled like rain and exhaust, and the specific cool of a Toronto autumn, and she stood on the sidewalk and took a breath that went all the way down. She called Theodore. He picked up on the second ring. She could hear, faintly, the ambient quiet of a hotel room in Calgary. How was it? He asked. It was fine, she said. It was actually fine. What happened? She started walking toward the parking garage on Wellesley, her heels clicking on the wet pavement, the city doing its ordinary nighttime things around her. She told him about Gregory and the speech he had prepared. She told him about Celeste and the housing project and the co-op in Scarborough. She told him about the lemon tart. He laughed at the lemon tart. She liked the way he laughed. You said you had something to tell me, she said. I did. A brief pause. Not nervous. Exactly. Considered. I've been talking to my team about potentially opening a Toronto office. For the development company. She stopped walking. Theodore? It's been on the table for a while, he said. I'm not telling you it's about you. It's a business decision. But you're part of why Toronto feels like the right city. Another pause. I wanted you to know. She stood there on a wet street in October with the city moving around her and thought about her grandmother's kitchen in Timmins and the light through the window on Carlaw Avenue and a conference in Vancouver in February where she had almost not gone. Okay, she said. Okay, yes, she said. I mean, yes. That's good to know. She could hear the smile in his voice. I'll be there in 3 weeks. The community housing board meeting you mentioned. You looked that up. I did look that up. She started walking again. There's a restaurant I've been wanting to try. Near the waterfront. I'll clear my schedule. She hung up a few minutes later and put her phone in her coat pocket and kept walking. The Fairmont was behind her. The city was in front of her. It was just Toronto in October, wet and lit and moving. But it looked, from where she was standing, exactly like the kind of place where a person could build something solid on ground they'd cleared themselves. She did not think about Gregory for the rest of the walk. She thought about the courtyard design she had proposed in Hamilton. She thought about the light through her kitchen window on Carlaw Avenue. She thought about 3 weeks from now in a waterfront restaurant and a man who listened the way some people listen. She thought, this is what it feels like when things go right in the quiet way. And it was enough. It was, in fact, more than enough.